Hello, my name is Aaron Cavanagh and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Post-Burnout.com. Post-Burnout.com is a culture website dedicated to venerating burnt-out artists the world over. This is our website's podcast where we publish full-length recordings of our interviews, which are sometimes the unedited versions of our site's articles and at other times are exclusives. If you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back, and if this is your first time listening, thank you for checking us out. We hope you enjoy and consider subscribing, giving the episodes a thumbs up if you're on YouTube, or giving it a rating if you're anywhere else. It really helps us out. Thank you. Alright, so in this edition of Post-Burnout.com interviews, we talk with the Sligo pop musician Mr. Billy Fitzgerald. Billy made his name in the 2000s and 2010s with his indie rock band, the Dead Flags, who went on to have a lot of success, which enabled him to perform across the continent as well as get on radio and television. However, Billy was kind of dissatisfied with the music that band was making. It no longer reflected what he was interested in, and as such, he started a new project called Mr. Billy Fitzgerald. This is a new electropop solo project with influences from the likes of Beck and Eels. With this project, Billy began releasing new music last year with his first single All Fucked Up Now, which was followed by Give Me a Chance and his latest single Give Me Love. Tonight Billy will play Little Whelan's on Wexford Street, and tickets are available in the bio of this episode. In this interview we discuss the new project, the success of the Dead Flags, how he got into music in the first place, his production work and learning that side of the trade, how the music landscape has changed before his eyes and how he's adapted to it, his upcoming debut album, the aesthetics of his work, pop music in the Irish music scene, and a dissertation's worth of discussion on pop music.
Hello. Sorry.
Hey Billy, how's
Video
it going?
video's coming on.
Sorry,
Sorry.
just a sec. There we go. How are you?
Hello. Not too bad. Aaron, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Yeah, I was just making sure all my settings were correct.
Yeah,
um,
there was a big window up in front of me there saying like, "Are you okay with this meeting being recorded?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm okay with that." I'm
okay.
pressing the button. It's like, "Okay."
Actually, that's interesting. I never see it on the other person's end, so I don't know what that looks like.
I think it's one of those things. I don't know if you use lots of different video software, but it's like it's always different on every piece of software. I'm
Mm.
flicking from one to the other. You're like, "Hang on, which is it on this one?"
Yeah, it's a real it's a real nightmare. Like, trying to use all the different, I don't know, all the different kind of competing things. Like, oh my God, like, cause
Yeah.
most people like kind of like are cool with Zoom and stuff, but every now and again you might have to do like a specialized thing, and I'm always like, I always get kind of anxious. I'm like, oh, I have my
It's
comfort
and
zone a
it
little
and
bit.
if you didn't look at that beforehand and you're just like, uh-oh, it's one
Yeah,
minute.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
no, thankfully that's
Yeah.
never happened, but I've always been afraid of that.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's really nice to meet you, man. I won't take up too much of your time. I guess like the first question I was just going to ask, quite simply as an introductory, is kind of how did you first get into music yourself?
Oh, okay. Now let's go back a few decades.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I like properly got into stuff. I always wanted to start a band when I was a teenager, and I just didn't know anybody who played instruments
Yeah,
like me. And anybody I did was like into Oasis or something. It was like
yeah.
never into the same sort of stuff. So I really just started out with a few mates from school, like when I was 18, and had a band for years and stuff like that. But like I was always kind of like, oh, I want it to be the best version of this. So I always felt like whatever I was doing was like the first step on the way to the next bit. So I was
Mhm.
always in and out of lineups and bands that I never thought were good enough for me. But looking back, it's like, perhaps you weren't good enough for them. So yeah, it's a long, twisty story of different bands and all that sort of stuff. But
Well, what were
eventually,
you kind of like wanting to do in terms of like who were your kind of like inspirations, and who were you trying to, I guess, kind of emulate, and what was your sort of first instrument that you began with?
I started the guitar. My dad plays a load of different instruments. He's in like brass bands and choirs and stuff. So I used to steal his guitar. My parents refused to buy me a guitar because
Yeah.
they knew if I did, it would end up in the back of the wardrobe or something like that. So I used to sneak into his room and steal his guitar. And then he only found out when I broke a string on it. And I thought, oh God, I've broken the guitar. So I
It's
got
like
it.
sneaking
Yeah.
for a smoke when you're a kid,
Yeah.
or you're
This
like
is
playing
my,
guitar. It's like
this is my most rebellious part of it is like stealing a thing and breaking a string.
you're like, I hope they
Um,
don't hear it.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I thought like I'm not making much noise in my room. My parents
Yeah,
were very supportive, but like I was had an electric guitar turned up to whatever when I was like
yeah.
14, just going like yeah. Um, so yeah, everybody could hear me. But I first started playing the guitar, mostly taught myself that, and then would fool around on the piano and stuff, and wanted to be a drummer for years. But yeah, the influence and stuff again is like people like the Frames and Radiohead when I was a teenager, which is a long time ago.
Mhm.
And then more when I started playing myself and kind of started, the way you start emulating who you would like to be, and then you
Mm.
start finding your own voice. And when I started finding my voice, it was more me and an acoustic guitar and kind of going towards things like Neutral Milk Hotel and people like that. That was kind of, I was starting to find my own sound, but it was
Yeah.
always, the weird thing was I always wanted to be in a band because I wanted to be like, have a group of people on with me, but I was always approaching it like a solo artist and wanting everybody to do what I wanted to do. So I finally got the message about 10 years ago and like, okay, maybe I should just do this on my own.
There's obviously, like, I guess your sort of biggest band in terms of in terms of reach and notoriety was the Dead Flags.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, how did that project begin, and how did it end?
Yeah, so that was one of those things where I was finishing up college and I'd been playing in and out of bands, which I had a band called the Dead Flags for a long time, like just kind of different rotating
Yeah,
lineups. But myself and two of the guys who were kind of serious out of those rotating lineups went, are we going to do this or not? And it was like I finished up college and we were just like, okay, let's do this. And we got into a
yeah,
rehearsal room, we started really honing things and we kind of decided on a sound and did stuff. So that was about, I think we lasted for about 4 or 5 years, but it was like we really took it seriously and we like had mentors and we had a great producer who, Carl Odlam, who produced all our stuff. And we got loads of advice and we went out and we played, a lot of like all over the place, like all over Europe and stuff. And we were just this really tight three-piece pop rock kind of band.
yeah,
And that was, yeah, we were great. We were a great band and we did great stuff, but it was one of those funny, not to kind of turn this around, but it's when I look at the Dead Flags, I see myself when I was a teenager, finally 10 years later, realizing finally getting together the sound that I wanted when I was a teenager.
yeah.
I'm kind of going, I don't really listen to this kind of music anymore,
Oh
you
no.
know, and yet, like we were great, and I loved the songs that we wrote and the songs that we played and the sound that we had. But it was this kind of thing of like, ultimately towards the end, it was like, do I really want to be playing three chord, three piece pop rock right now? And it's like, I didn't really cop that until after the band ended. It was like, that's why I've been a little unhappy for the last 2 years or something, because I was
Yeah.
just kind of reaching for something else. I'm getting very dark in all of the. I'm just bringing it over into the ditch. Will you pull me back over?
No, let's keep going.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Let's get this
yeah.
spelunking equipment.
Let's get this therapy thing going.
No, but that's an interesting thing too, because like would Dead Flags been the first band that you've actually recorded material with that was released?
Yeah, I mean, I've been recording kind of at home for years and years and years, but like the Dead Flies was like the proper professional outfit where we went and the three of us went and got a producer and recorded with the producer and honed our sound with them over a number of years. And it was all like it was instead of being DIY, we were trying to do things the way we thought we should do them, and it was and like trying to like I said, like learning from other people and trying things out and learning from what worked and learning from what didn't work and stuff, and it was really interesting. But the earliest recordings that we did were like in, I think it's 2008 we did stuff, and anything we had out before that was kind of like was like self-recorded demo versions and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, we recorded a single. I think it was 2008. We recorded our first single and put it out, and it was like did really really well. It was back when there was charts and
Yeah.
physical CDs, and you could send mates in to buy all the 10 CDs a piece and stuff. It's great crack. Not that we did that sort of thing, but yeah, so yeah, that would be the earliest. So that I think like now still available. I think I rolled everything onto one big deluxe package on Spotify of like everything that Ed Flag's ever released is like on a
Yeah.
50 track album or something. Um, but I'm kind of very proud of that. But it's mad to listen to it now because it just sounds to me it sounds very very different. To what yeah.
Yeah, actually, when you kind of like you mentioned, you've kind of been doing this for a while. I
Hmm.
was wondering how like how do you think the kind of musical landscape has sort of changed, just as long as you've been kind of doing this at a professional level?
Yeah, it's changed so much because like I mentioned there, like the hilarious thing of like I think it was 2000. 12 or something that the band broke up, and I was just like, I'll take a year off. We'll do some, and then I'll start seeing what I want to do. And I dragged my heels so much, and real life and jobs and things like that got in the way so much that by the time I was starting to do things, it was like everything had changed. Like
Mm.
everything had changed, and not just like you can look at the industry and see how like it's just gone. Like it's just like it's a completely different thing. But even just the way people make music now is very, very different. Like I'm a good 10 to 20 years older than most of the people I'll be playing with at a singer-songwriter night or
Mm.
something. And a lot of the time, the what I've noticed anyway is the quality of the singing and the quality of the songwriting and the quality of the musicianship is so much better. And I
Yeah.
think it's probably something to do with people like being exposed to way more stuff, but also you don't have to spend 80% of your effort trying to find an answer. You can find an answer and another answer and another answer and learn how to play the piano that way or learn this little trick or learn how, how to use pedals this way or plugins that way. And it's like you don't have to put in all the effort just to get to, oh, that's what that does.
Yeah.
Um, so it's I think and things like BIM and things I think have
Yeah.
changed things in Dublin completely. And I'm not sure if it's all for the best in some ways because you get a people have an amazing stage presence and lighting thing, and they like the singers especially. I've noticed the quality of vocals is just people are amazing.
Yeah.
But it's also everything is very polished and it's very hard sometimes to get into it because it's all very, very beautifully done. And you usually have to wait 10 years for or 5 years for an artist to kind of reach that level of polish. And
Mhm.
I'm used to being in dank basements watching like people making their fumbling over stuff, making their
Yes.
mistakes and going like, so I remember seeing like this is yeah again I just keep talking about how old I am but I remember seeing Damien Rice before he released anything like fumbling through a new song. Oh, this is a new song, it's called
Yeah.
Delicate, and he's just like playing through something and you're hearing somebody fuck up and kind of make mistakes and kind of like miss notes and all this sort of stuff, and there's something really real about that. And I think now people kind of perfect things before they go on stage, and I'm the exact same. And but I've learned if I go out with out polished stuff, I learn way more, and people lean in a bit more and sit forward a bit more, and it's
Yeah.
I think there's a balance there of things are completely different. Some things are way better, but some things are like, we're missing something. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked about this before actually, but
Mm,
I think it's probably perhaps a bit more daunting to become a musician now because I remember when I
yeah.
was a teenager, I played in bands when I was like 16. I'm 30 now, so I'm a
Yeah.
little bit older than most people in the scene like now.
Yeah.
And I remember like, back in like 2010, I was in a band when I was 16 and like, you go to see like local bands live and there would just be people with kind of shitty setups,
Yeah.
kind of most of the set would just be covers, and then there'd be like maybe two originals at most, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, and they'd make a big deal of it, like here's an original one, but it was actually kind of frowned upon to kind of like do a set just of originals. Where now I find like everyone has like a full set list of originals.
Mm,
They're encouraged to have a set list of originals, and as you said, the quality is just
yeah.
songwriting, playing, production, everything is just like professional. It's professional standard from the get-go. And
Yeah.
I wonder if it's kind of daunting for people who aren't, like you mentioned, I think BAM has a lot to play with it. Um I wonder if it's daunting for like a teenager to go to like a local show who wants to get
Mm,
into music and be like, shit, it's unapproachable,
yeah.
because I think of like, when people say like, bands like the Ramones and the Sex Pistols kind of made music kind of adaptable to,
Yeah.
it kind of took it away from like the Led Zeppelins and sort of said, no, you can do this too. I wonder
Yeah.
if we need a resurgence of that kind of thing of just shitty teenagers playing bad music.
Like yeah, and it's a thing. It's I was at a night of bands a few months ago, and I saw a band get up, and there wasn't a tuning pedal on the stage. There wasn't
Okay.
like, and the drummer was a bit all over the place.
Yeah.
And on some levels, I was like, this takes me back.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
none of us should ever hear the bands we were in when we were teenagers
Yeah.
because
Totally.
how brilliant you feel about it, and then
Yeah.
if you hear it back, it's like, oof.
Dude, dude, I remember being in a well, not in a rehearsal studio,
Yeah.
and they were playing. I went down. It was they were upstairs in the studio upstairs, and I went downstairs. I was just drinking like a cup of coffee or something, and I could hear them playing. I was like, "Oh my God, we sound that bad!" And then
Yeah,
another
yeah.
guys in the band was like, "Yeah, we do, yeah."
It's like I didn't know that, did we? But I think it is. You're right though. Like I kind of feel it's creeping back in anyway. Like people, things always go back and forth and stuff. And I think like one of the things that I try to do is like I don't know why I started doing this, but like I didn't want to bring a laptop on stage
Mhm.
because whenever I watch, and this is not, I'm not dissing any bands or anything like that, but I was watching a band, I think at Her World Class Heroes or something like that years ago, and it was like they're playing with laptop, and you couldn't tell how much was on the laptop and how much wasn't. But there was this little bit of a disconnect between me and the artist, and I just kind of felt is that something that it's something I started to notice was that just me anyway, whenever I saw the laptop, I started thinking about what was on the laptop and what wasn't, and
Yeah,
how much like could they go off on some fucking thing if they wanted to or not.
yeah,
And I started this thing of just wanting to be all analog, but I'm not technically minded in terms of this stuff enough at all. So I've like drum machines and synths and loop pedals and stuff, but there's no laptop up there doing the thing. And I was like, yeah, this is my style. And then I was doing a gig in a show last year, and I was like playing this thing, and somebody came up to me and went, "Wow, that's amazing!" And this is the nerve center, and he pointed down. I had a laptop there that was playing the playlist before the show or
yeah.
something like that, and the laptop was just sitting there underneath the keyboard and everything like that. And I was just like, yeah. What is this big thing about not having a laptop on stage when you're like I've got one with me every time anyway doing something else. So, but I do think there is a thing there of like there's a bunch of open mics that I started playing on in the last year, and one of them doesn't have, but yeah, most of them are like you can't bring anything but yourself. You know, you don't bring a
Mhm.
drum machine. So I used to bring a drum machine all the time because I just like having a little fucking beat playing, just playing over it and jamming with it a bit. So it's
Yeah.
not sequenced; it's just a loop. And I was told I couldn't. I was like, "Oh, I can't play with it." The drum machine is like, "I've been playing for fucking years with a drum machine. It's okay." And I went out and played. It's like that's kind of refreshing. Then I went to
Yeah.
another one. It's like we don't have a like a PA. We just kind of it's just a guitar and just
Yeah.
you and you just stand up. And I was like, "What? You can't possibly do that." And
Yeah.
I was going through this thing of like,
It's like everyone, shh.
yeah, reduce, reduce, reduce. And what the thing that it did for me was it made me go, "Oh wait, hang on, what's good?"
Hmm.
I know this is what I've known for years. Is like what's good is if the song is good on with just you, even without an instrument, whatever like that, playing it. If the song is good like that, it's going to be brilliant with other little bits added to it. But if
Hmm.
but if it can't stand up without that, like then is it a song or is it
Yeah.
a production? Like, and there's no problem with it being a production, but like if because for me it's all about the song and the performance, so I shouldn't need crutches. And it was actually going out there and being forced to playing these like circuits and stuff and just being like, no, you can't bring a drum machine. It's like, okay, can't bring
Yeah.
this, you can't bring that. And it was like it was just a thing of like this is actually great for me, and it got me to be a lot more confident about my songs, but also showed up which songs were like, oh, that's not as good as I thought it was. But I think that's
Actually, as
part of it. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
no, sorry, I was just gonna say, as someone like yourself who now with your solo music is kind of incorporating the analog kind of music of traditional instrumentation as well as the electronic elements, do you find that your music has to be kind of adaptable to any kind of circumstance, or is that just coincidental?
Yeah, I think so. I myself and the drummer I play with, Dennis, have this. We're both really fixated on things being really neatly put together and stuff.
Hmm.
And I realized that I'm so fixated on having everything set up that I don't actually know what I'm playing for the sound,
Yeah.
what I'm playing for the setup. So what I realized is like I have the song has to be able to live on its own with just me and a guitar. The song has to be able to live with, yeah, maybe a little keyboard as well that I play or a loop pedal that I play. It has to be able to work with the drummer and the other thing. So I've got like five different like this single that I've just put out. I have like
Hmm.
five literal different versions of it that I can play at any one time.
Yeah.
And I only realized that I'm going to do a recording of it today, a live recording of it. And I'm just like, which one am I going to do? I actually don't know. I'm allowed to do whichever I want.
Yeah.
But I think you kind of have to like the song. Do you ever see the Tiny Desk stuff for the
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
NPR? And they're not always that stripped down. A lot of the time, there's,
Yeah.
there's like 15 people there. But a lot of the time, it does encourage you to be very stripped down. And it's like it's the stripped down artists there that really do like you notice how great the song is because it's just them. St. Vincent did one. I think it was
Yeah.
her most produced album, like her biggest kind of thing, like the one before this maybe. And it was like she just brought this tiny guitar, and she's an incredible musician anyway. And she just, I think it was the fact that it was so stripped back and stark, and it was like, yeah, that's a great song.
Yeah.
Like that's a great song. That's a great song. That's a
Yeah.
great song. It's not just a great production. And I do think you kind of need to be able to lean each way, and sometimes it's somebody else, like if you were like, hey, I want to hear you play live, you have to play a piano. It's like, okay, you have to make it has to work. It's sometimes good if somebody else makes the decision for you.
It'd be
Um,
interesting just to like see how stripped back can get. You go, okay, you can play it, but you can only have like a salt shaker and that's it. To
this
see how
so
stripped back.
so I have a version of this song that I'm talking to a gospel choir at the moment to kind of do
Yeah.
it, and I was listening to the song once, and I was actually had a salt shaker in my hand, and I was shaking, and I was like, "This is pretty good on its own."
Yeah.
But it's funny. I have another song called "All Fucked Up Now," and I wrote that. I was only reminded of this recently. I wrote that to work under any circumstances. So it's like it can play on. It's just this riff that is like a three-note riff, and you can play it on one string of a guitar or one finger on a piano or things like that. And I've been toying recently with the idea of going out and doing a completely a cappella thing. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it tonight, an open mic tonight, but I'm kind of like, I want to go out and just do it with claps and stuff
Yeah.
because it's a song that's based, it was written so that it could be played on anything. And I kind of love that. But you kind of forget that you originally, you wanted
Maybe
it
with
to
that
be played.
intent, yeah.
And then you just all the time on the guitar, here's the guitar. And it's like, well, I've never been stuck with the piano in the corner. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Actually, let's talk about your solo work then. So actually, as you mentioned, there's kind of a decades long gap between this and Dead Flags. I was wondering
Mm,
actually in between that time, because you mentioned kind of music becoming a lot more I don't know, like kind of accessible in a lot of ways. I mean, like
mm,
everything that like pretty much the history of recorded music you can get on your phone now.
yeah.
I was wondering, how had your listening sorry, how'd your kind of musical taste change? How'd your kind of the way you listen to music change in that time? Like, because obviously, I think there is a huge gap between,
Mm.
sorry, a huge chasm in the kind of in the sound between the two projects. So I was wondering how much that was influenced just by, I guess, the advancements of technology.
I think I'm going to ignore the fact that when you're describing it, and that's exactly how I would have described it as well, but it makes me sound like I'm fucking 70 years old. So recorded music has begun.
Well, because
No,
I
no,
remember
you're
like going
completely right
to
though.
like buying CDs and stuff like that, and it was a
Yeah,
commitment because it was like, you know, I'm forking out 10 quid for the
yeah.
CD at the time. It's like so it better be
Well,
good.
well, I'll tell you something bigger than that. So this will date me as well, right? It's like, are you from Dublin? Or are
Yeah, yeah.
you? Yeah. So I'm from Sligo, right?
Hmm.
So the local record shop wouldn't have the kind of stuff that I like, and then myself and my friends used to either have to order stuff in. So it's like, I hear DJ Shadow has a second
Yeah.
thing. How do we order that? And the guy is just like, I'll just type in DJ Shadow into the computer, the green and black computer. But what we used to have to do is actually travel up to Dublin every month or two and
Yeah.
go like, okay, I've got 50 quid. I am gonna buy the CDs. And some of my favorite CDs are the ones I took a chance on. I went in to buy a Velvet Underground album once and they didn't have the one I wanted. And I
Hmm.
had to buy a second one that I had never heard of, but I was like, I hope this is good.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
have to travel the 3 hours back to Sligo to have a listen to it. And you're going to give it a chance. Like you're going to listen to it about 15 times before you throw it away.
Yeah.
Like if it's no good, you're going to give it such a chance before you decide that. And
I
that's
know,
that
actually, sorry, I
that was
remember
a
that
big
too,
one.
where it's
Yeah.
like you just be a friend, like you just have like your favorite acts and stuff like that, and
Mm.
if you go to like place like at the time Borderline Records was
Yeah.
one I loved, and Terror Records even when it was on
Yeah. Yeah.
Wexford Street, sorry Wicklow Street,
Yeah.
and you go in, you like just be they just like here's the band, and you just be looking through all their CDs and you just like find shit. It's like I've never
Yeah.
even heard this CD before. And sometimes it was shit. Sometimes it was like really bad live recordings and stuff like that.
And I think it's the thing that if it was a good artist and you found something good, you forget about the five shit ones that you
Yeah,
found.
yeah,
You'd really
yeah.
go like, check this out, because that's the one you tell your friends about. You're like, actually, this is worth listening to. Like, but I think that's the thing. Like the great thing about when streaming came along, and because downloads for me never turned into a thing. Like it was either ripping
Yeah,
CDs off people and listening to them, or whatever. But when streaming came along, it was like you could finally actually dig into artists that you'd never checked out before. Like I don't think I'd ever heard of D'Angelo.
Mhm.
And then like in 2013 or something like that, I think it's before he released like Black Messiah, and a friend of mine was just talking about him, and then another friend of mine was talking about him, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" And it's like his album's been out like as long as I've been seriously into music, and I've never heard of it, so I could listen to it immediately. Like I
Yeah.
could turn around. I didn't have to go on a mission to listen to it. Got really into it, and you can listen to all his stuff there. At that time, it was only like two albums, but I think that's the big change. Is like I remember getting all of Tom Waits's catalog off somebody when I was doing my thesis in college and listening to it. Just I don't know what it did to my brain, but listening to every piece of music by him, and that was amazing. But somebody had a hard drive with all of Tom Waits's albums, whereas now it's like. I think, what's this thing about Led Zeppelin? I've heard they're good, but I've never tried them.
Yeah.
And it's like, you listen to them. But for me though, when the band broke up, I had that thing of I knew I didn't want to make music like that anymore. I wanted to make music like the kind of music that I listen to. And everyone has a broad taste in music. Nobody's just into one thing.
Mhm.
Um, so one of the things I did was like I said I was going to take a year off, and I was like I'm going to fall back in love with music again because I don't know if you've talked to a lot of people who find this is being in a band is a job, and you start to listen to music for your job.
Yeah.
You listen to things and they're good, but you're only listening to them with like you go to a gig and half of your attention is on, oh, they're doing that with the lights, like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a little,
Exactly.
and it robs you a little bit of this thing you loved to try and get in, to try you try to get into it because you loved it, and now you're it's just it's
You
work.
start seeing the
Yeah,
ones and zeros. Yeah. I've actually
yeah,
heard comedians say similar thing too, where
I'd say so. Yeah.
yeah, where the live stand-up just becomes like all
Oh,
they can
that's how
focus
he's
on
doing
is to
it.
structure the
Yeah,
joke. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
It
Yeah,
just becomes an equation, like
I think I heard that like as a John Mulaney or something saying like kind of, oh, that's funny.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
funny. You're not laughing anymore. And I think it's exactly the same because like the amount of gigs that I've probably ruined on myself by going, it's interesting how he's using the amp there, and it's so uninteresting, like as a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
But what I did was I purposely went, okay, I'm not going to touch an instrument, I'm not going to record anything, I'm not going to write anything. I just basically went, I'm going to go to as many gigs as I can. I'm going to go to things that I want to go to. I'm going to do that stuff. And then I already had a bunch of records at that point, but I just said, I'm going to start buying records because it's really enjoyable going and looking for records. And they're very nice and they're very,
Yeah.
very cool. And it was just a thing of like going into secondhand record shops and just buying, looking for random things and stuff. And all the two things are going to a load of gigs for fun and going to record shops for fun and listening to loads and loads of music. I was getting loads of people to just recommend me stuff that I'd never heard. I spent a year just having a fucking great time. It was just this thing. I remember going along to something like one of the festivals and just having a whole weekend of watching great music without ever once thinking, "Oh, that's what they're doing. That's very
Yeah.
interesting." But it was really inspirational to me as a thing because I was lucky it worked because because I had to pick up the guitar again. I could barely play. It
Yeah.
was like, uh, but that sort of thing of I think that's something we're pretty way off the point now, but like it's something about now you can access that stuff. It all exists. I worry about like live music now. There's not as much, the diversity of gigs that you can go to. It's kind of feels to be shrinking. There's an underground
Mhm.
that you can plug into, but there's just the same heritage acts coming back again and again and
Mm.
again. So like, the bands that I've gone to see this year, I could have gone to see 20 years ago as well. Like
Yeah.
it's that kind of stuff. But I definitely found for me after the deadlines, jumping into music as a fan again made me go, I only want to make music that I'm a fan of. And when I started playing again, it was like, oh, there's something very different coming out.
Yeah.
And it was very, there's the one rule really, like I've got billions of rules for my music, but like the one big rule is like I have to like it. I have to
Yeah.
think that if I was in the audience, I would like that, and try not to think about anybody else. But just if I'm standing at the back with a pint, I want to be whatever I'm doing on stage or
Yeah.
whatever like that. I want to think about me going, oh, kind of cool. I like that. So yeah, so that's a very selfish way I look at it.
I actually want to ask, like, when it comes to this, like, this sort of new style of music you're doing.
Mm,
Um, well, first of all, I have two questions about it. First is, who would you say are kind of the direct influences on this direction, or do you see each individual song as their own sort of separate thing with separate influences? And the other question I want to ask is, when it comes to kind of the production side of things, do you see it as an extension of the songwriting? Because
mm.
I think kind of when you're incorporating electronic music, it is production to some degree.
Yeah.
So I was wondering how much do you find production is, sorry, how important do you think production is on this project?
On this, it's very important. I To a negative extent, to a really positive extent, but there's also a negative part to it. Give Me Love is a really good example, right? Where I've recorded that like I didn't have this with any other song, but I recorded it like 6 times, different ways, and it was never working. It was always this kernel in my head that never really worked. I'd work on it for days and days and days, and I'd be like, it's brilliant, and then I'd
Yeah.
come back to it and go, what the hell? This is reggae. What's going on? It's like, what happened there?
Yeah.
Uh, but the I since one of the things I did for solo stuff was I wanted to make sure that I was actually fully engaged with the recording. I never felt that I always felt I was a bit distant with the recording in for the Dead Flags. And I kind of left it to the producer, but didn't really, uh, I don't think I kind of let the producer guide it. And the producer was asking for guidance. And I'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, what do you
Yeah.
think? You know?
Yeah.
Whereas with this, like when I was a kid, I worked out how to do tape to tape recording and overdubs. So I worked out how to do multi-part harmonies and like
Yeah.
multi-instrumental things. I invented that. I invented multi-track recording in my room for myself. Oh, that's how real studios work as well. Okay, right, that's great.
Yeah.
But I what I always found with that was that you play the basics of a song and then you'd add on some harmonies or you'd add on another bit and the song would suddenly have dimension to it and it would be something that you couldn't have been on its own. And I always found that to be part of the songwriting process, that there's the song, okay, there's the basic of the song, but when you start recording it, I never understood the idea of uh like you just go in and record it, you just lay it down or something like that. It was, to me, it's always like, okay, I know the kernel of this and what's it going to sound like at the other end of the process. I don't really know. I'm aiming for this or I'm aiming for that, and I'm just going to go and try it out. So for this, for Give Me Love, for example, all these different wrong directions, and then sitting down and going, okay, right, I know it's all these things, and then you're throwing on a harmony. I just improvise my harmonies as I'm doing them, and I stack them up, and all of them are improvised. And then you go, okay, that sounded good. Okay, okay, that sounded good. And
Yeah.
you're just finding your way through it. So I've no idea, I've no memory of making any decisions when I'm doing that. It's all flow state sort of stuff. And I really love doing that. And the hilarious thing is like when somebody asks you, okay, so my wife is doing some backing vocals with me, and I'm just like, should I go in and try and pick out what the harmony lines or not? Because I have no idea what they are. No
Yeah.
idea. But what I was going to say about that specific thing about production, "Give Me Love" is a song that at least I finished the song. There's a lot of songs that I was writing where I would write the basics of the song and I couldn't wait to jump into the production. And the
Yeah.
song would be worse because of it, because you wouldn't finish writing the song. It'd be a production, and then you just, I better have a second verse, I guess. And you'd write the
Yeah.
second verse really quickly so that you could just get into the production. So all the songs that went that way are less good because when you peel it back to just playing it live, it's a little flat. Whereas
Yeah.
the song that stood on its own and then you're just helping it be more stuff, it's really exciting. So the Give Me Love was like it wasn't working at all. So I went out to open mics and started playing it and it was like, this isn't hitting with people.
Mm.
This song should be really, really great. It's not hitting with
Yeah.
people. I go back, I address it, I come back the next week. Okay, it's hitting a bit better. And I was like, I think like 6 weeks later, I was playing, I think it was in Whelan's, and I was just like playing the song, and suddenly people are clapping along. I was like, yeah, it's hitting. And then
Yeah.
I was feeling the end of the song come up, and I was like, oh, this isn't the right ending. I could feel it. I was just like, it was like telling a joke or something like that, and you're like, they're not going to like this. And I realized it needed another bit, and I improvised an ending to it, and suddenly it was like, that's the ending. There you
Yeah.
go. That's the bit that everything was missing. And I just went straight into the studio and just had the whole arrangement, got it done in like 6 hours, and I was like, there you go, it's done.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that like the production is really important, but you really need to write the song. I don't think I write. it is writing the song, but I think you need to take the time to write the meaning of the song and all that stuff beforehand. Um, you had asked two questions there, though.
Yeah.
One about influence and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, so yeah,
um,
so I was asking like did each individual song, do you find them to be I don't know, like do you
mm,
find them to be have separate influences in terms of like, okay, I'm gonna try and think in this kind of mode, or do you
mm.
find it all kind of like do you find there's great continuity between the songs, and is that intentional, or do you take each song as its own entity?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's kind of half and half where I think each song, when you're doing a production, you'd kind of need to think about references, especially if you're working with somebody else. So like I brought in a drummer for a few songs and for a few times, and the third time we worked together, I had realized the way we needed to do it was we needed to spend an hour listening to stuff together. Like him
Yeah.
behind the drum kit and me thing. I was just listening to stuff and kind of going, oh yeah, this. You needed to spend an hour vibing off each other on listening to things and stuff. And then you'd start into playing. And it'd always be the simplest possible thing. But if you didn't have reference points that you could both listen to, then you were both imagining things without communicating them to each other. So I think that those reference points are the individual ones for the songs. Oh, this song, the beat on that song, or the orchestra on that song. Whereas I think for the whole thing, I really needed to kind of have a bit of somebody to point to, like that would carry me the whole way through, because I needed to be able to dump certain songs off out to the sides and go, that's actually not for not right now, or that doesn't go with the other songs, right? Or that mightn't be me right now.
Yeah.
So that was important, I think. And the funny part about that was like, who is that? You know, who's like, what's the natural version of me if I have to peel back and back and back?
Yeah.
Um, that's a lot. But I never understand when people go, I'm gonna be exactly like this artist, and then they just that's what they do. I kind of like I think you should aim for something, but let it drift off all over
Yeah.
the place because that's when it gets interesting, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually,
uh,
I did a question based on that. So you were talking about like when it came to the production, like you want
mm,
to kind of get ahead of it, but then you kind of realize that so I mean if we think of it like this, like the songwriting and the music itself is kind of the base, and the
mm.
production is kind of the superstructure on top of it, right? Let's put it like that. I
How
was
far can we
wondering.
go with this metaphor now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I was wondering, like, would you ever be interested in working as an external producer for other artists? Because then, you could kind of, I think, then maybe look at it a bit more objectively and kind of like go,
Mm,
okay, here's what's lacking from their songwriting, and here's what I can add as a producer, and
mm.
then I think like just kind of through osmosis, you could kind of like then it would just sort of seep in, and then like you'd always kind of have that perception from the get-go. I don't
Yeah.
know if you think that's
Yeah.
valid
I've,
or.
I, I've thought about that, but I think that's a really interesting thing because the way there's a lot of people, especially now, because production is available to people. I think when I was growing up, only dance music was a thing that was kind of available to you. Like you
Yeah.
know, you could get everything in your room, and you could make dance music. And now, like you know, now you can kind of you can make a whole album like any instrument, anything like that. You can make a whole album with a small amount of gear. The entry point is not as high. So there's a lot of people
Yeah.
that call themselves producers, and I think that's really cool. And I don't think of myself as a producer because I love the band Eels, right? And myself and Dave, the bass player in the Dead Flags, used to talk about like if we could get anybody to produce our album, it'd be like Beck or E from Eels.
Yeah.
And it was like, and I don't think Beck has ever produced stuff for anybody else, and I don't think Eels have ever produced anything for anybody else. But it was this idea like we just loved the sounds that they got and the way they thought, and it's like imagine if you worked with like, sorry, don't get me wrong, it was we're never going to get these people. That was never going to
Make
happen.
me an offer.
Yeah. So yeah, call up back there, you know. But I think for me, the production thing, I would never claim to be a producer apart from my own stuff
Yeah.
because I don't really know what I'm doing and I don't have a process. I'm just kind of going by feel. I have
Mhm.
a friend, Sammy, who's like, he's an incredible producer. He's actually produced a lot of different people's albums, and I've always had him as a sounding board for my stuff. And the moment I remember the moment he said, "This is good enough to release" about one of my things, it's like, yes, I've been like one of my recordings as
Yeah.
opposed to one of my songs. It was just like, okay, I'm there. But he's a producer in that I've heard him produce a lot of different records, but by different people. And it's always got this stamp of what he does. And it's half kind of Bjork, half kind of traditional Irish music and stuff. And I don't know how he does it, but it always sounds like a Sam album. And it's just like, it's amazing. And I'd listen to my stuff and I'm like, I know my stuff sounds like me, but I think I would either take over somebody else's stuff or I'd be too afraid to make any
Yeah.
decisions. And I think I'd love it as a challenge. I think it'd be really fun. It'd be really interesting. But like the people that I've ever wanted to kind of like, oh, I'd love to record that person. Like occasionally it happens to you, and you're like, but what I would do is just tell them to shut up and do all the stuff, or be too afraid to tell them anything. And it's like I think a producer needs to be able to do, you know,
Yeah.
ebb and flow. So
That would be kind of funny though to take their song and just come back with something totally different. And it's
yeah,
just you. I was
yeah,
like,
here
yeah,
we go.
I have the basic idea, and it's like you keep like maybe one line from the verse, and that's the
Perfect.
only
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah. That's it. It's in there, you know. But do you ever like, I don't know if your own stuff or and that, have you ever hand stuff off to somebody to remix it? Well, the best thing is when you've
Yeah.
got the song and you go, right, this is great. Now I can hand it off to people to remix it and do crazy shit. And they come back with the coolest shit. And you're like, oh, I wish that was the version now. Because they've just taken those like songs like there's a song of ours called Start a Fire Tonight. And it was a brilliant song on its own. And then we got three different people to remix it, and they just went completely different directions. One of them came back with two different versions. So we
Yeah.
had four different remixes, and it was like, oh, I wish the song sounded like that. I wish the song sounded like that. And you feel like, oh, maybe you could incorporate that bit into the live version or something. Like I love
Yeah,
when
no,
people do that, hand it off completely because you don't care anymore. You're just like,
yeah.
that's cool. My version exists. So, you know,
No, it's really interesting when you hear remix version, just how much it kind of changes things like space, the
yeah,
spacious between the acts, but also just the atmosphere and the kind of mood and the
yeah,
kind of it's very it's odd when you have a song that's kind of upbeat suddenly becomes somber or
yeah. Or good.
vice
Yeah,
versa. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And it's very interesting like how production I think people don't really appreciate it. I guess it's like, a film with editing, you can take the I forget, I think Bob Odenkirk said, you could give me the dailies to Citizen Kane, I could make you a piece of shit, And it's like, yeah,
exactly.
like it's
Well,
just interesting how like, you can kind of do that. Sorry.
and like like there's been a lot of videos about Steve Albini going around, obviously
Oh
since he
yeah, yeah.
died, and so I think a lot of people have been hearing his opinions and stuff. Steve
Yeah.
Albini's opinion about like he's not a producer, he would never call himself a producer, but he doesn't want to have any influence
Yeah.
at all, and it's like I don't know how somebody would do that. Like so he's like. So I like he just pulls back completely and just does the mechanical job of like making the perfect, brilliant
Yeah.
recording of this thing, but he will have no artistic input whatsoever. And I'm just like, how would one do that? Like, how would
Yeah.
you divorce yourself so much, you know?
Well, see, the thing with Steve Albini was that
Yeah.
there were two albums he did early on in his production career for other artists. One was Surfer Rosa by the
Yeah.
Pixies, and the other was Tweez by Slint, their debut album. And in both of those albums, he incorporated like studio sounds,
Yeah.
like
Of
like people
course.
talking
Yeah.
between songs and stuff like that. And he felt later on kind of guilty about that because he felt that that was something he was imposing on the artist, and
So
that
he
was
had a
kind of a
reaction
vanity
to,
thing. Yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah.
he felt guilty about it retrospectively. So, and I think in the case of the Slint album, they like didn't want to work with him after that just because they felt he'd ruined the album. So
Ooh.
when they made Spiderland, they went with a different artist. But I think that's like really interesting because I don't think the Pixies ever said anything to him, but he just like himself felt kind of guilty about that and was like, I felt like I put too much of myself in that.
Uh,
And that was kind of like that's what kind of influenced him then to kind of have a more standoffish kind of. I think he used to say, "I'm the plumber, I
yeah.
fix your toilet, but the plumber doesn't get to tell you what you do with your toilet." You
But
know?
and it's amazing because he like for somebody to reach that level and like the level that he did like say in the early 90s even.
Yeah,
And it's like uh, to actually want to pull back, as in like to have learned those lessons is a very like it shows the level of ego there. He's
yeah,
able to kind of go, actually, I think I did the wrong thing. And
yeah,
I'm gonna pay that forward. I'm not gonna go back and remix that album. I'm gonna make sure that I don't make that mistake again. It's like it's really like I think that's the difference is like as a producer, I think you could work with anyone and as you say, like people don't realize that producers can have a huge effect on things. Like people talk about Rick Rubin, and it's like, oh, what does he do? He doesn't do anything. Like he's a
yeah,
producer. It was like he does an awful lot. Like he's the
yeah,
hands off, he's the non technical producer, and yet everything he's involved in, like there's a high quality
Yeah, and
version.
actually, Rick Rubin's is like his discography is so varied. I mean, he's worked
Yeah,
with like Slayer and Jay-Z,
yeah.
um, but what's interesting about him, actually, as you were talking about, kind of like
Mm,
that kind of idiosyncratic approach that you have to your own music, where you're like, I don't know if I could work for anyone else because a lot of what you do is kind of instinctual and kind of just
mm,
based on what sounds right. It's not really based on any kind of like formula or theory or
mm.
anything like that. It really reminded me of Rick Rubin and his success with that. And I think he was doing an interview with Anderson Cooper from CNN, and he was like, "So you don't understand how to work a soundboard?" He's like, "No, no,
Oh
not
yeah, yeah.
really.
Just the
You don't
thing is
understand."
listing
He's
off
like,
like no,
so
no.
he's like, "So why should anyone hire you?" And he was like, "Well, if they trust me, if they trust what I'm doing, I hope they'll
Mm,
come along and they'll trust it." And and it's like I don't know. At that point, it's like you have the portfolio to be like, here,
yeah, but it's interesting for me, and it's like I love comparing myself to Rick Rubin or Steve Albini
yeah,
because clearly I'm on there. But there's an interesting thing for me where like I learned a lot from the cool thing production wise was that nobody's ever taught me how to use like anything like I use Pro Tools and it was like
yeah,
nobody's ever taught me how to use anything there. But I've hung out with I've sat behind a load of brilliant engineers doing different records, and I'm just kind of like I'm sitting there, and engineers usually they're like a lot of the time they're stoned out of their brains and
yeah,
working on something for you, and they're happy to talk about what they're doing to you. And I've been in, I was the one who would stay in all the sessions and just sit there quietly, like
yeah,
watching. And what was hilarious is after about 5 years of doing that, when I opened up Pro Tools for the first time, my hands knew loads of things that I didn't realize I knew how to do. And I was like, how do I know how to do that? And I
yeah,
learned all this stuff. And I, but it is really artless though. Like it's kind of like, I think this, no, no, no,
yeah,
yes, okay, grand. But if somebody went to me, like I was thinking that is that like if somebody listened to my stuff and like critically to go like to fix audio problems or whatever like that, I think they'd be going, what the fuck is going on here? You've got four basses playing the same thing because you didn't know how to put an effect on one and not have it go,
yeah,
like it was
yeah.
like, yeah, like, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sometimes you can really like folk songs too. Like
Mm,
I've done some very very amateurish production on my own just for demos, and
mm,
I've like totally fucked songs just because I'm like,
mm.
well, I made that mistake and now it sounds like shit, and I don't know how to reverse it.
This is
So
I
then,
yeah, like once you figure out how to do something that's non-destructive to a thing or to a thing, you're like, great, I can
yeah,
do anything then. Like it's like I can try out anything. But it's
yeah,
very, I think for me as well, like I can't remember what I was aiming for when I was trying this thing or that thing. But one of my favorite ones is just layering on harmonies and it accidentally sounds great. And you just go,
yeah,
okay, cool. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. It's sounding great. Because I went back to I have one of my songs that has a big four-part harmony thing, and one of them is out of tune in a way that is fucking horrible. And I went back in to kind of go, I'll just re-record that, re-recorded it in a different place with a different microphone and stuff like that. It's like, it doesn't sound the same. That doesn't sound as good. What's going on?
yeah,
And I ended up, I didn't want to use the auto tune or anything like that. So I was like, eh, I just like bury it a little bit in the mix and double it here. And just like, it's like sticky. Like if you look at it, it's just like,
yeah.
oh God, like what have I done to the thing? Just because at the time, I didn't notice that I hit a fucking horrible note. And then, a year later, I'm listening back going like, all right, I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah,
Which isn't
yeah.
good. Oh.
Is that do you ever watch like producers doing like talking about the mix of the songs? Because
Mm.
it's always very fascinating when you kind of like see them strip back the songs and they're there's all these like details you just don't like really notice. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, like without this drum beat and without this it just sounds like shit.
Yeah.
How meticulous like every little detail has to be in order to actually make it sound good.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it's especially fascinating, I think, when you listen to quite minimalist stuff,
Yeah.
where there's something that OK Computer is a hilarious album because OK Computer, everybody at the time, because I remember buying it at the time and just being like, this is amazing, this is the greatest thing, and they've worked magic in the studio. But when you actually get down to it, it's a live, most songs on that are a live recording of the band with one or two things added in.
Yeah.
And it's no great magic, it's just very good recording. But it's like, oh, it's live because it sounds like, it's basically like Sergeant Pepper's or whatever. It's kind of like, studio trickery all over the place. It's like, nope,
Yeah.
not much. There's a bit, but there's not much. And that's the stuff that I wouldn't know how to do is like the intricate, like I just place this little thing there. now everything is beautiful. I think
Yeah.
if like I think when you watch those things, especially like on YouTube or whatever, and you watch people taking them apart, you're like, they really knew what they were doing, and you're like, but did they,
Yeah.
or did they just go, that sounds good, let's leave it on? There's a, there's a yeah, there's a lot of those things where trying to figure out, did the band know what they were doing, and in hindsight are claiming to know what they're
Yeah.
doing, or was it just luck and
Yeah.
they went, oh, that's great, I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, but that's the beauty of it too. I remember watching Butch Vig
Yeah.
talking about Nevermind. And
Mm.
on the song Polly, there's a bit where Kurt comes in and goes, Polly said, and then he starts singing it and goes, Polly says it backwards, whatever. And he was like, yeah, that was just a mistake. You just came in too early, but we left it in because it worked. And it
Yeah.
does. I mean, it's like it's such a beautiful part of that song. And it's like, you know, it is a matter, I think this is like true of any kind of artistic medium. It's of like filmmaking in particular. I've done
Mm.
filmmaking and like one time, for example, I was doing a short film for college and someone mispronounced a word, but it worked for the character. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna put that in. Like the actor
Yeah.
just mispronounced it, and I was like, yeah, that works, So we just kept it and stuff like that. And it's just that kind of like the beauty of that stuff too, where it's just like
I,
and sometimes I think you kind of miss that stuff a little bit when
yeah.
it's when you're doing stuff kind of completely on your own. Like if you're writing a book or you're writing, I don't know.
Mm.
Sometimes it's hard because you're just gonna create correct your own mistakes,
It is, and I think that's something that I tried to do when I was recording all my songs, is like try and leave the mistakes in. If something sounds a bit magic, even if it's not perfect or whatever like that, when you take it out, it's you miss it. So there's a bit on like on this song where it's like I didn't re-record the piano. The piano's from an older version of the song, right? And I was looking at the piano, and it's just like this is me just playing the simplest fucking thing in the world, and I couldn't get the timing right because it's all chopped up and just
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
But I recorded it with I think the mic. I just basically went. I was at the end. I was like, I should have been home like half an hour before. Like I was just
Yeah,
like, oh crap, it's really late. But I just I think I just plugged in the nearest mic and just sat it on the piano and played this thing. So it's got this real honky tonk sound to it. And nobody might notice that, but I hear it and it's like, there's no way to brighten that up really
Mhm.
because it's just this thing. And then I fixed it a little bit because I just wanted the timing to be fixed. But when I went and tried to re-record it like for the song, I was just like, no, look, I love
Yeah,
the original. Just slap that back on it because that's the right one. And
yeah,
then there was me shouting something in the background or something. I was like, keep that in there and really miss that
yeah.
that stupid shout where I'm off the mic and I'm just like blah, blah, like it's like oh, I love that bit. So I love when mistakes stay on things. I think what's the thing the first song on In Utero was like that was on
Oh,
and it's like
yeah,
they started off
the
and they had to
Cuban,
turn the
yeah,
whole thing down like in the
yeah,
moment like this and it's like and they left it on because they were just like what's wrong with that like
yeah.
and I think
It was
going back
Serve the
to
Servants.
yeah, and going back to what we were saying before about there's a perfection. You can get to perfection now. You can make your vocal sound amazing. You can make all this stuff, everything, and people are becoming great vocalists and people are becoming great guitarists. I am not a great guitarist, and good. I'm a pretty good singer, but I'm also a pretty imperfect singer.
Hmm.
And I kind of leaning into how imperfect things are can be really, really exciting, I think, for people. And it's like, but it is odd because like as you're saying, like when you're back in the day when everybody's just like kind of scrappy and all over
And
the
everyone's
place.
off key and shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like the great moments, like you've just got this is your average, and the great moments sticks up like
Yes.
that band fucking killed then. Now I think it's a higher thing, like everything's like this, so it's harder and it's not as recognizable when somebody's doing something great and vulnerable and
Yes.
and stuff. But when you find those moments, they're the best fucking moments.
Yeah, well, I was
And
thinking back to
yeah,
actually like that scene because like to that kind of like Dublin music scene circa
mm,
the early 2000s and
yeah,
the only artist I could really think of because there's a lot of artists who was like around that time that like the only one I could think of that was like a teenage kind of
mm,
star at that time and was doing stuff that really kind of persisted was Orla Gartland. Every
yeah,
other musician either went away or did something else. Some of them went
mm,
on to other projects, but a lot of them just kind of like faded away or because but it really felt like I don't know it was just before BIM started because I
yeah,
was doing an interview with a different band who were in the first year of BIM
mm,
and it started in 2011 and that's kind of like I think like obviously once something begins like it kind of takes a while for it to become like really really popular. Now every artist I talk to pretty much is in BIM or has some
yeah,
connection with BIM. It's like it's very rare to interview
Mm.
someone in the Irish music scene now who's like,
Who has
yeah,
no
I didn't
connection
go to
or
band.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
But
and I think
and
that it's really brought the standard up from, just teenagers
yeah,
playing, the riff to Smells Like Teen Spirit or Master of Puppets in the Room.
yeah, yeah. But like Orla Garton's a great example of somebody as well. Is she the person who's just like didn't get into BIM and just went to London and just
Oh, I
kept
don't know
on her
about
thing?
that,
I
but
don't know.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. It might be somebody else. But she here, that's the example of an artist who's just finding her voice every day. She
yeah,
finds a new part of her voice, and it's like she released a single last year that's fucking brilliant. She released a single this year, and it's just like fucking hell. Like she's taken every step. Like every step is going further and further. CMAT's another one where
yeah,
it's just like she releases a fucking album every 9 months or something. It seems like, and it's a step forward, it's a step up. Like, and it's not just it's more better production or something like that. It's like she's going deeper into herself and her own voice, and she's going. And I think that's really inspiring. That's one thing that I find very intimidating is that I've been working on an album for fucking years, and life has just stopped me from
hmm
releasing it or whatever. And then the songs that I've got for the next album are pretty good. But I'm just going like, how do you challenge yourself to go deeper and find, get more and more honest? Because I do think that if I'm going to get very knobby now, but like if the frontier of like good production and stuff like that has been conquered,
yeah,
the only place you can really go to be a really good artist is like digging in and finding like the real things you want to say and like all that stuff because I trade in really good melodic catchy stuff and I will every single song I write will probably be fairly catchy and fairly poppy and all this sort of stuff but only occasionally am I going like oof that was a bit painful to bring up or that was like a lot of the time it's I can feel it like sometimes you just don't want to go in there
yeah,
and that's I think but that is probably the future really is like really being honest about these things because I think CMAT's another as I said like a good example of that of just kind of tunneling into her own stuff but
hmm
also growing and growing and growing because she's getting more and more eyeballs on her so it's just
yeah,
like she's got an audience that she can now go the confidence that she has is just going to be exponential it's great
yeah.
uh,
No, totally, and it's been really great to see her kind of like
mm.
rise and
Oh
it
yeah
seems like again like I'm often kind of reluctant to use the term overnight success because there's always so much
yeah
stuff going on behind the
she's worked her
background.
arse off for like 10
Exactly,
years
exactly.
yeah
So it's like, people just say that it's like, these bands are like overnight successes. It's like they've just been around outside the public purview for so long and then
yeah
they just break big. It's like, oh,
but it always happens. You read about any band. I remember reading Keith Richards' autobiography years ago, and it's just like I think there's a 3-page thing where between the club's massive
yeah,
success, and it's just like it's always at any autobiography of any of these big people you read. It's just like this moment turns around, and it's like, but they were only got there because they spent 8 years
yeah,
working
yeah.
their ass off, and then it's like, oh, and then we're up here. But yeah, it is the same, and it's only people like yourself probably where it's like you've been aware of all these people. So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's the definition of an overnight success for all the people who weren't paying attention.
Well, that's the thing too. Is like I'm looking at like a lot of the acts in the Dublin music scene, and
Mm,
I find it very hard to kind of gauge the popularity because I kind of go,
yeah,
oh, this act is very well known. Everyone seems to know them. Everyone like and then like you go to one of their gigs and it's kind of like not really attended very much. And
yeah,
then there's other acts where it's like, I've never heard them, but they have way more plays, and
yeah,
people are attending their gigs more, and it's like. I find it very hard to gauge, even as someone who's trying, like, whose kind of job essentially is to kind of be as on top of these things as I can be realistically,
yeah.
because there's such a plethora of artists that it's like I think it's difficult for everyone to know everyone. But even then, I find it hard to kind of gauge, like, okay, who will be, quote
Mm,
unquote, the next big thing. I mean, I have my favorites and I have my preferences in the
yeah,
music scene at the moment. And I go, I would love for them to really be big, and even like what I'm thinking of too, from my perspective. I don't know if you think of this, but I'll go to see like local shows. And I think one of the benefits of gigs sort of becoming a bigger, like kind of theater or arena size gigs becoming almost prohibitively expensive
mm,
is that it might encourage people to go to local shows a bit more because you can see like five great acts for like less than a
yeah,
tenner,
yeah,
and why I'm always thinking of too. This is like my A&R kind of brain, I guess. Is I'm looking at like artists and I go, they'd be a great match if this band ever came to Ireland. They'd be a
That's
great opening act. These would be,
yeah,
that's where my mind is at when I go to
yeah.
gigs. Is
Because
like,
I think that's I walked into a. I think the other part of it though is that like I was at Ireland Music Week or whatever you call it. Ireland Music Week. Is that it? Yes.
yeah, yeah, or music
So
week, yeah.
obviously I'm playing it this year now. But but went to that last year with a mate, and I was like, I think it was just one of the nights I was just pottering around and literally hadn't heard of most of the people, so I was just kind of picking it from just whatever I got. I think I was like looking on Twitter or whatever that and just going, that sounds interesting. That sounds interesting. And I just picked out a thing and we went from venue to venue. And we have a rule of three songs where it's like you give anybody three songs, but you give them the three songs, and if they haven't done it within three, like you're gone kind of thing.
Yeah,
And I was really struck by how different there was a bunch of good acts, like really good acts, and they were just like they were all so fucking different.
yeah.
And it was like you're saying, is that like you wouldn't put them on one line, like because like there's not a lot of crossover between
Mhm.
them. You'd probably want a little bit more stuff. But I walked into as a Chubby Cat was playing, and I just walked into see her, and it was just like mind blowing
Yeah, she's
because
blown up
it
now.
was,
Yeah,
oh yeah, and you can see it. And I'm not saying I'd be the hugest fan of all of her stuff, but there's a bunch of songs that she had. I went in there, and it was just you could feel it in the room. There was something special going on, and the difference there, it's like going back to like the I just keep ragging on Bim, don't I? But
they
like
have it coming.
but yeah, yeah, here it comes now. Yeah, like, who is attacking us?
Yeah,
Like, but what I loved is that like you had this thing where somebody was like emoting and dragging shit up, and kind of like they had all the production, but they also had something really vulnerable going on, and it
Mm.
was just like this is what it's all about. It's just like it's something great happening. But there was something about wasn't a big crowd. There was a big crowd in to see her in this small venue. But it's like, when is she gonna be playing the Olympia in a year's time? Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe not. Like it's kind of there's just like Orla Garton was playing Grand Social the last time she
yeah,
was over, and it's
yeah.
like
That's the thing.
it's
You never
really
know.
unpredictable. I don't like it used to be the kind of like fairly predictable kind of
Yes,
arc,
yes.
and but yeah, it is hard to see how these
You know,
things
what I find
put
interesting
together.
too is that the kind of difference between sort of UK and Ireland too, because like you
Yeah.
get acts who are like pretty big in the UK who
Mm,
over here just don't really seem to have a fan base, and vice versa.
yeah.
It's always very interesting because people you the convention used to kind of be if you broke one market, you generally broke the other. Basically, if you broke the
Yeah.
UK market, by extension, you were breaking the Irish market. Where I think that's
Yeah.
cool now is that like that's not really the case anymore, and I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic where you see bands who are like
Yeah.
I interviewed a band called the K's. I don't know if you know them, but they like in the UK they're playing like main stage like Reading, main stage Isle of Wight. They're
Wow.
playing 3,000 the Albert Hall in Manchester, like 3,000, and then they
Yeah.
come over here. They're playing the Grand Social. It hasn't even sold out. I was like, what the
Yeah.
hell? It
But
was
it
crazy.
is the difference now is that you don't have the single route where everybody's listening to the
Yeah,
same stuff. There
exactly.
isn't
It's much
really,
more fragmented.
yeah, and I think the idea of people like the other thing is that like you'll walk by Kilmainham and it's like, oh, there's a gig on, who's playing? It's like walking
Yeah,
as a few years ago, like walking on cars, like I've never heard of this band, and
yeah,
they're playing, and it's like they're Irish and they're whatever, and they're
yeah, yeah,
and they're sold out fucking Kilmainham, and you're like, how did that happen? Like, am I?
yeah,
I mean, you immediately go, oh, I must be just out of sync with what's going
yeah.
on, kind of thing. But then you actually also like, yes, that's part of it, but some of it is just it's quite narrow. The kind of like the things like you know somebody like Chubby Cat could be playing Olympia, or they could be playing Three Arena, and you may not have never heard of them, and
Mm,
yet they have got
yeah.
like 50,000 rabid fans in this city alone that
Yeah.
you've just never heard. Like you just
Dude, I
hadn't
was
had a
thinking about
conversation
that
about.
with K-pop, Korean pop
Yeah,
music,
yeah,
and if a Korean pop art like BTS were to play here, they'd probably play multiple dates at the arena, sell out every
yeah,
one, right? Say they did 3 days, they'd sell out each
mm,
one. Yeah, at the same time, they're not really
yeah,
mainstream in an Irish context. It's kind of not countercultural, it's subcultural. It's
yeah,
it's kind of a subcultural thing, K-pop within the context of Irish music. Yeah, at the
yeah,
same time being subcultural can now be thousands, like selling out an arena could be
yeah,
subcultural now. That's how fragmented we've gotten. I think that's kind of interesting. It's an interesting dynamic, and I think in a lot of ways, like we just haven't really seen it before. Just how kind of like decentralized everything has
Yeah.
become. Everyone's kind of everyone's in a
I,
music federation of their own.
yeah, and I think the hardest part of that for when you're at my when you're trying to kind of like you're scratching around the bottom of things, it's not like you're trying to do things, you're trying to kind of see what should I be doing, how am I getting on now, whatever. And you've got there's no because there's like 15 different like measures of how people are doing. There's a guy I play with at an open mic, and I knew him from work and stuff, and beautiful singer, just really talented guy who has got like 15,000 followers on Instagram. And it's just like, what? And he's just like,
Yeah,
he's blown up. He's just huge. All this stuff, but it's in a really narrow place over here. And he's still playing to the same amount of people. Like, the same amount of people know him in Dublin as know me. Like we're playing
mm,
the same kind of thing. So it's just like,
yeah, it's
how does
insane.
this even work anymore? And like, if everyone was the same small level and you just had all these small niches, it would be understandable. But it's not. It's like it's all over the place.
Yeah,
And I think some of it is just to stop. I think for me, and I'm just more talking to myself here, is that like to stop thinking about that and to just keep doing your thing because I think especially with like when you're not professional, you're not full time or whatever. I don't know how anybody can be full time anyway, but it's like
mhm,
um you are just making music and the only thing you can concentrate on if you're concentrating on getting likes or getting subscriptions or follows or whatever like that, you are taking your mind off the quality of your songs.
yeah.
And it's so hard to do that though. It's so distracting to go that
But
way
it
or
is
that
kind of
way, you
important
know?
in the kind of current
Mm,
economy to a degree, the social
yeah,
media economy, like that those are like so relevant. In fact, like I find like a lot of times Spotify plays and TikTok views are kind of put in the EPKs of a lot of artists now that are
yeah,
made. They're like, oh, this song, like, why should you? Because like again, everyone's vying for competition, so it's
yeah.
like, why should you interview this person over this person? Well, you might have heard them, but they have 6 million views on TikTok for this video, and it's like, okay, it's like
Yeah,
it's that is just kind of like the reality of it. And in fact, I do
yeah.
know I don't do this, but I do know other editors who, if someone contacts them for say coverage, and they
Then
do
if they
look
don't
up.
have a
Yeah, exactly. They're like, well, they'll definitely prioritize the person, even
yeah,
if one is more artistically aligned with what they're doing or whatever. They'll
mm.
still prioritize the person with 15K followers versus say, 500 or
Well,
whatever. And it's just
and
like,
I mean it does make sense because I mean your site, I'm assuming like it makes sense for you to have like, okay, I'm gonna do well out of this person's followers or it's
well,
not a
that's the
charity,
interesting thing though, man, is that, well, yeah, no, but like the
Yeah,
thing about like I've ads run on my website and stuff like
yeah,
that. But the thing is, like, the amount of views you have to get to actually make money on that is like insane. Like, it's just not
yeah,
a realistically viable thing. So it's kind of I would like to make a profit on it, but it's non-profit pretty much, right?
yeah,
But at the moment, but what I'm saying is like, there's really no way to quantify it because like I do certain acts who are bigger and well known, and they'll like when the interview goes up, they go, "Oh, this interview is up," like go and they'll share a link and all that. And you can look at the view count. I don't really, again, you can drive yourself
yeah,
crazy just looking at the
yeah,
views.
yeah, yeah,
I don't really bother with it, but like when you're doing edit, when you're editing posts, it shows you the view count on WordPress, which is what I use to edit my site,
yeah.
and it's just like it's unpredictable. Like really big acts can get very little views, and then sometimes like smaller local acts can get much bigger views. So
Yeah.
again, if you're trying to do it in that sense of kind of going like, well, my priority with this is to get as many views as possible, to get as many people clicking on the website so that the ads pop up and I get paid. Um, it's just like it's just an unpredictable thing. It's like gambling, it's like you're
That's
not going
yeah,
to do it. And it seems like something that would be a secure bet. Like, the
yeah.
more followers, the more people are engaged. But then also, I mean, you have to remember sometimes people can have a lot of followers and stuff, but very passive engagement, where other people can have a
That's the
lot
thing.
less followers, but like
Who
very
are
engaged
super
people.
engaged. Yeah, yeah. And
So it really depends.
I think that's the thing for me is that like I can either spend all my time trying to follow all the best practices or I can try and just concentrate on my music and be very
Yeah.
proud of my music. And that's
Which I think is
unfortunately
ultimately what's going
that's
to
the
stand the
thing.
test of
Yeah.
time.
It is the thing. I want to be proud of the stuff that I'm doing. And if it's but I enjoy I've done stuff with filmmaking as well, and I kind of enjoy the challenge of putting out like little videos and all this sort of stuff.
Yes,
Like
yes. There's
it
a new
can,
video
yeah,
for your song. Yeah,
yeah, and it's like there's a lot of there's some fun to be had with that, but I also think at this point, like I'm not, I would love somebody to hear my music and go, God, that's amazing. But I'm much more interested in me thinking it's amazing. Like
yeah.
I'm like, unfortunately, like it's like, sorry, fortunately for me, like that's what I'm concentrating on, and it's like it is the wrong thing to say in the
Yeah.
industry or whatever like that, because it's like,
Well,
well,
if
I
you
have
don't
no
like it, then
control,
why
but
would anyone else?
and this is the thing, and to kind of come back to what I was saying at the start is that like it's not that I don't like my old band's music or anything like that, but the horrible realization of like I'm not sure I would like our band, like as in like I don't really like this
I
kind of
don't know if I'd
music and
listen to
whatever.
this if it wasn't in it.
And yeah, and like I can't say that for sure with my stuff now, but I can say that like this is very much in my taste. This is very
Yeah,
much the kind of shit that I like. So that's much more important to me. And again, I'm not embarrassed by anything I do, but it's like I don't I can stand behind what I'm doing and I can kind of go, yeah, that's good. You mightn't like it. I might, but I
yeah.
like it. And that's the only thing I have control of. Yeah.
Absolutely. Dude, you've been very gracious for your time. I just have two final questions
Ah, I
I'll
have
just
apparently.
ask you.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah. No, no, no. I've all the time in the world, but I just don't want to
Yeah.
take you to.
No, thanks.
One
I
thing I want to
appreciate
ask is, obviously the music you're doing now, a lot more pop oriented. How do
it.
you find pop music in the Dublin music scene? Because I think there's kind of be there's it's sort of bubbling up. I think a lot of Irish music has been focuses on thing have had focused on things like aggressive post punk, indie
Mm.
rock has always kind of has never really gone out of vogue in the Irish music scene.
Yeah,
Kind of, but I think like the new kind of like indie rock, post punk, always again metal to some degree has always existed in the Irish music scene. But I think kind of how would I phrase it? Like uh, like sort of grassroots indie pop, let's say,
yeah,
independent pop, is only really starting to kind of become a thing. It was always like pop music, uh, was generally seen in here as kind of like a little more, what's the word? A bit more, manufactured, I guess,
yeah,
for
yeah.
lack of a better term. Where now, artists like yourself, and I think artists like Basiche and C Matt and
Mm.
Noel Blaze and are kind of showing that like, no, actually people are doing it. People are inspired by pop music and are doing it at a grassroots level. I was wondering, how do you find the kind of pop scene in Ireland is?
I It's a weird one because I find it hard to separate out the male singer-songwriters, especially today, Irish ones, are have a sound
Yeah,
to them that I find is very pop, and to me, it feels like. I'm from Sligo, right? So it sounds a bit like Westlife to me.
yeah,
It's very, it's like, and there's a certain sound that people have, and it's like I'm not dissing that, but it's like it's not for me. But it's that to me feels like pop on a
Mhm.
thing. It's the kind of music that I've always been interested in myself is kind of alternative pop, where it's like it's not afraid to be catchy and it's not afraid to be hooky and things like that, but it's also, always going to have a little bit of alternative stuff to it. And I have to say that unless you're talking about people like John Francis Flynn or, like Lankham or something like that,
Yeah,
I find that pop kind of covers a lot of what people do. If you've got a chorus, it's going to feel a bit like, there's the spiky four-piece rock band kind of like pop things. But outside of that, Chubby Cat's a really good example of
Mhm.
this, where it's like, I think what she does is really pop, it's like, and yet it's got this edge to it and it's got like a very personal thing to it. But to me, production wise, the hooks, like the 21st Century Panic Attack last year, right? Even that as a title is not a traditional pop song title, and yet it's the poppiest single in the world, and it's such a vibey song. I can listen to
Yeah,
that to cheer myself up. I can listen to that to be a bit down. So for me, it's like I think pop covers so much
yeah,
that I think it's really healthy. Like there's loads of like it's like if you divide it into the strata that I'm kind of dividing into there, I think this it covers a huge amount of stuff, and it is very healthy. And its own, but it's back to the thing we were saying is that like it's easier to get to that polish and stuff that somebody like Chubby Cat is the example of the person who can kind of go. okay, yeah, I can do all this stuff, but I'm going to bring my viewpoint to it and I'm going to be different from the other things that are left and right of me.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is like it's a very healthy place, but pop is too broad for me. It's kind of like I want to hear, I don't mind if the production is used, but I want to hear where it's going this way or that way. I
I
don't know
also
if
think
I feel like I've just qualified this shit out of that.
No, I
Um,
also find, and I'd like to get your read on this,
yeah,
that pop music has become a lot more idiosyncratic. I think
yeah, yeah,
there used
yeah,
to be an aversion, I think, to having too much character, and especially
yeah, yeah.
when it came to pop music, having any kind of like political declaration, any
Oh
kind of
yeah.
viewpoint, really, and beyond just, I'm in love. And I think that was like, and I don't think that was the fault of the artist, to be clear. I think that
Mm,
was just the industry. Where I look at like a lot of artists now, and whether you like their music or not, I think they are very idiosyncratic themselves. Like a lot of the mainstream pop artists, like
yeah,
Billie Eilish, Dua Lipa, Taylor
yeah,
Swift, very idiosyncratic, doing their own thing. And I think like even you look at say like Bambi Tug, and it's like what they're doing is just like you would
mm.
not really see like 10 years ago or whatever. It was a lot more
And yet
contrived, I think.
it's almost mainstream
Yes,
now.
and I think that's
But it
very cool
brings,
though.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think yeah, that's kind of I think that's much better stated of what I was kind of trying to get at. But like it is that thing. It's that like I think people are demanding a little bit more. Well, I think music fans are demanding a little bit more from their pop music, but we've been doing this since Sugar Babes came along, basically. Is that like like when suddenly people realized you could do a little bit, you could skew a little bit.
Hmm.
But if you listen to, but I don't think this is anything particularly new because if you listen to a best of the 80s kind of thing, right? The fucking shit you will hear that could be a hit and could break your brain. Like if you just go to like When Doves Cry by Prince, like Prince being quite different
Yes,
from a
yes.
lot of things, but like it's like, what is happening here? This is crazy. And then you hear like Dead or Alive play something. What the fuck is that? And like Adam Ant comes along. It's like, and it's the Bowie thing. I think it's the Bowie
Yeah.
influence of people realize you can do anything. And if it's got a hook to it, and I don't mean a hook just like it's the same, it's a boring kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, like if it's got something that hits people, like Kate Bush is another good example. I mean,
Yeah.
Hounds of Love is an amazing pop song, and yet it's not like that is a like if it didn't have the beautiful production, well, it wouldn't be Kate Bush, but like if it didn't have that accessible production, it'd be a weird Tom Waits song. Like
Yeah.
it's that's what it kind of sounds like.
And also, if you listen to like a lot of, I think, pop music from the 50s and 60s, like
Oh yeah.
one thing that will strike you from a lyrical perspective is how cerebral it is. Like how,
Mm,
I don't know, like, there was a lot of emphasis, I think, on storytelling, but also, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like an example off the top of my head now, but like, you listen to like Motown and stuff like that, and like they're
yeah.
telling these kind of like really personal, like love stories, and like, but it's like mixed with like humor and like a
Yeah.
lot of like just like really good like mantras. I don't know how to explain it, but
There's
just like very clever writing.
Yeah, there's a if you listen to Smokey Robinson's a really great example of this stuff. Like Tears of a Clown is an amazing
Yeah.
pop song that is so like it's not the most complex thing in the world, but it's just like how is that a pop song? Like and yet it's like
Yeah.
it's really fun, and yet he's just talking about being at a party trying not to cry.
Yeah.
Like, it's like
Yeah.
and like making loads of jokes so that he doesn't fall, like he doesn't
Yeah.
collapse, kind of thing. And you're like, there you go. There's your fucking like that's your idiosyncratic like pop songs. It's
Do you
and like
find like
yeah.
sorry.
No, yeah,
No,
go
go
on.
ahead.
I
Yeah,
have no
what I
better
was gonna
points. Go
say
on.
is what I was gonna say is, do you find and this is just my theory, I'd love to
Mm,
get your perspective, but that sort of the allowance of a lot more personality, the allowance of a lot more I know artists' sake in their own music, do you find that
mm,
that's in any way kind of contributed maybe to sort of the sort of the downfall of the kind of mainstream labels, the mainstream kind of networking in the mainstream. Like I think of someone like a Simon Cowell or something like that, who kind of
mm.
like controlled the purse strings for so long and had such dictation, and artists and management had such dictation on the artists they were
Yeah.
representing. Obviously, I think like and that's kind of gonna have vogue. So it's kind of like, all right, let's just let people try new things.
Yeah, I think in addition, like, and it's hard looking back, you can like can have opinions about all sorts of stuff, and
Yeah.
like who knows what's right. But if you look at Justin Timberlake back when he was first coming out of NSYNC and being massive, right? You look at him at that time, and he's basically telling you, "I wanted to do this, all this stuff differently, and I wanted to." And Zoltan Burrell got into into some studio in the middle of nowhere for like, and we're totally left alone and stuff. And it's like, where are you?
Yeah.
Like, but the narrative of that is, I wanted to just turn my back on this manufactured pop, because there's nothing, in my opinion, worse than something like NSYNC, which is just every edge has been filed
Yes.
off. It's
Yes.
it's there's nothing interesting going on, kind of thing. Even if the hooks are good,
Hmm.
there's no opinion coming through. And then he comes along and he's doing some really interesting shit, and he's kind of like, he seems to have an opinion and stuff. And it's like that narrative, whether it's true or not, makes you turn your back on, like, S Club 7 or something, because you're just going like, they don't have an opinion, but this guy says he
Yeah.
does. So you do. So again, it goes towards that thing of like, which, I remember, is it Sugar Babes or somebody else came out, and it was just like, oh, they're actually a little bit, they're heavier, they do this stuff. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's a narrative that the same people that, are feeding to me, and I'm lapping it up,
I think that's what they said
like,
about
yeah,
Girls Aloud. It was like,
yeah,
the sounds of
exactly.
the underground. It was
Yeah.
like edgy.
What the hell is this? But, and I think in reality though, like, I think it's probably half, everything is narrative that's being spun by somebody, and somebody's going to make money out of it, and that's fine. But like, I I think that happens all the time, and now you've got, most people seem to, like, CMAT doesn't need a big label behind her to get to do what she's. I don't think so anyway.
Right.
To do what she's doing,
I'll fact
because she's
check
in.
that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And never point out if I'm wrong. But she doesn't need a big, like somebody else telling a story. She's figured out the story that she's telling, and I don't think there's anything false about it or inauthentic about it. But it's that authenticity thing. We think Justin Timberlake doing Justified is more authentic than NSYNC, so we gravitate towards it. But also, it's the people who are 15 listening to NSYNC are now 18 listening to
Yes.
Justified and going, yeah, this has matured with me. I think
Yes.
that happens. Every artist does that, and George Michael's the first obvious one of that, where it's like, yeah, yeah, wham, but now I'm the Grammy Award winning,
Yeah.
artist, and you do see that, and it's like,
Or the
but
Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson trajectory too,
yeah, I don't want to talk about Michael Jackson, but yeah,
yeah. Why not?
but no, but
Jokes.
exactly right, and but
So,
also what you have in those things is you've got people with things to prove, because I'm either always going to be that person, or I'm going to show that I can do this on my own.
yes.
Robbie Williams is another good example of like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm turning my back, I'm real now, and it's like, you're fucking not, like, but you're doing a really good job of kind of appealing to a whole section of the fan base that wants something a little bit more real, or something a little bit more personal, or
Yeah.
something. I think going back to like the core of what we've been talking about, I know, like, is more my thesis, but it's like, I think that's the thing, is that, like, it's, especially with AI shit and things like that now, it's like, it's gonna be relatively easy for us. It's relatively easy through technology, through all this sort of stuff, to have fairly decent middle of the road stuff that is
Yeah.
sounds pleasant. It's like, and I'm not saying the rise of AI or whatever, but it's like, it is going to be increasingly easy for us to have middle of the road, easy to listen to stuff. Not going to be a problem whether it's whoever writes it, but that's not the stuff that's going to appeal to people who are fans of music. It's not going to be meaningful. It's not going to, like George Michael, like doing his solo stuff after Wham. He wrote all the Wham stuff, but when he started doing his solo stuff, he tried to go a little bit deeper, started trying to go a little bit more real, and it started to resonate with people, and people kind of sat in a little bit and go, well, what are you doing? This is
Yeah.
interesting. And I think that's the same thing that's going to happen now, is that, like, it's really easy to make a pop song. It's really easy to make yourself sound great live. So the floor, or whatever, of good, just it's like,
There's a
okay, there you
baseline of
go, that's it.
competency.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're so much better with words. Sorry.
No, I've used that line before. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I think I've asked like pretty much everything. I guess the final thing I'll sort of say is like, what do you have kind of coming up in the future, either
Mm,
distant or near? I think you mentioned there's work on an album, and
yeah,
also if I could also tie into that, one thing I noticed was kind of continuity between the singles released so far, and instead of continuity,
yeah.
um. I was wondering, like, when it comes to kind of the art direction, is that indicative of what we're going to see in the album, or is that just kind of indicative of, I guess, um, for lack of a better term, your persona?
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. Like I've been working with so I've had an album together since like before the pandemic, and luckily enough I didn't release it then because it's much better now. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah,
but literally it's been years of putting together stuff. So the album is coming soon and nearly finished and stuff, and that's great. But one of the things I was working with a guy called Noon Boy, is a graphic designer from Sligo, and we were working on a visual or an aesthetic for me, and it wasn't really coming together at all. And then when I started to write out what is the visual way of presenting myself, it started to come together when I started talking to photographers about it, and they were asking me for direction, and it was just started to come out. And one of the things was, yeah, like I wanted a strong visual to tie it all together. So like, yeah, there's a like obviously it's the same photo shoot or whatever, but it's a strong tie between the singles. There's something similar for the album, but it's a little bit more involved. And I really like when artists have a full like the visuals and the everything kind of ties together. And yeah, I wanted something strong for that. Eels are a big influence on me since I was, quite young, and it's they're again a very alternative pop band where everything's very poppy, but they're not in any way mainstream like they were
yeah.
for a very short period of time, and then they were again when Shrek came out. But it's like,
I mean,
but
they
like
played the Olympia last year.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I see them
That's
every time
mainstream.
they come along, you know.
Yeah.
But they're very, there's always a very coherent kind of like aesthetic. And I'm a designer in everyday life. So one of the things that I was like, why can't I just design something for myself? And instead, I went and talked to Neve Barry, who's an incredible photographer, and she managed to kind of like figure out what I should look like on like a photograph, from a photography perspective. And then suddenly I brought them to Kevin Noon, the graphic designer, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we could do
Yeah.
this." And suddenly there was a kind of a three-part riffing on each other thing going on between the three of them, and it was like, okay, this is working. And it helped me actually find a bit of confidence in the music as well. It was just like, yeah, that's it. And I can put it out there. So I was making the video for Give Me Love, and it was just like, Michael, who was working with on PR and stuff, was just like, you really should lean into that art, the aesthetic. It's a great aesthetic. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Like, and just went to, like really leaned in with the video, and it was just like, yeah, it looks great, and it really works for the songs as well. But yeah, so I think for me I like having that aesthetic, but it's building up to something as well in my head. It's all coming together for that.
Actually,
So
one thing I
yeah.
want to ask, just for leave,
Yeah.
um, are you familiar with the album Valentine by Snail Mail? Because the aesthetics of that kind of remind me of
Oh
that.
no. Oh no.
Oh no, I'm
Have
not
I
accusing you of
stepped on
plagiarism. I'm just saying,
it?
yes, Snail Mail's Valentine album. She did a similar thing with that album where the singles kind of had leading up
Yeah.
to it were from the same photo shoot essentially, and there's like little tweaks here and there. So I think it's just a really kind of interesting way to go. Yeah,
Yeah.
look into that one. That's I think
I
that's a
I
similar.
will.
Actually, it's interesting you mentioned Saint Valentine. So yeah, she. Sorry, St. Valentine.
St. Vincent.
She St. Vincent.
Yeah.
I was thinking Valentine, the album. We
Yeah.
got it. She opened for at what do you call it? Fairview. I was at that show,
Ah,
so yeah,
I had
there you
COVID
go.
during that fucking gig. I
Oh
think
no, that was a
the
good show
tickets
actually.
went.
That was
Yeah,
a really
yeah.
good show. It's the same. Not to rub it in.
Yeah. I want to hear that it was terrible.
It was
Yeah,
the worst show ever. Everything broke down.
yeah, that's yeah, I figured. Yeah, yeah. They needed me there to to
Yes.
bring it together. It was like there's just one person missing from the audience here.
Do you ever actually think about that? Like who you'd like to kind of what artists you'd like to kind of support
Yeah,
or be in a bill with? Yeah. You don't
yeah.
have to name them if you don't want, but it's just saying like is that something that you think of if it's like, you could get an Insider at MCD or Aiken or something like that. Go, hey, if you're ever booking this act, I might be
Yeah, I remember in the band, I thought we were going to get a chance to support Elvis Costello once, and
Oh
I was
shit.
just like,
Yeah.
it was this hilarious misunderstanding where I thought I was
Okay.
being asked to host a stage at a festival, and I thought I was being asked to,
Oh.
by a band. I was like, no, I want to support. But yeah, I think there's a bunch of artists I'd love to support. But to be honest, like every time I'm at a gig and the support act isn't great, I'm like, I could have supported
Yeah.
this thing.
Well,
Or
it's also like
yeah,
sometimes you go and you go like, why them? Like not
yeah.
even not that they're a bad band or anything, but you're just kind of like,
Why that
why this
choice?
pairing? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
always
I
strange.
yeah, and I find that's a little like, but I like when I love when the support act is a little different,
Yeah.
and it's always bad if it's just the junior version of the
Yeah, yeah.
of the thing.
No, that's fair.
But it's also I love when bands go on. I love when bands come into town and they actually have a local artist supporting them
Yeah.
as well as somebody else. Like I think that's great because sometimes you actually, you know, you wake people up to things, or you give it's the promoters doing their job, which is making sure that they're growing the talent, the local talent, like getting them used to being on stage, getting them in front of that kind of stage, getting them in front of things, getting them to meet older artists who've been more experienced than them. Like I often think there's a lot of promoters who just calling the same five people again and again and
Yeah.
again and again. You know, instead of kind of
That's the thing I worry about too,
yeah,
is like,
yeah,
still just
we're
the
not
same acts.
growing that next generation of
Yeah.
people. But I don't know who I. It's basically like if you said literally anybody to me, I'd be like, yes, I'd like to support them. Like uh, like Gruff Rhys comes to mind. I would love to
Okay.
support. I'd love to open for Gruff Rhys, but like that wouldn't be. That would just be me playing to a bunch of 50-year-old men. So it's not gonna do anything for anybody. But I'd like to.
So I think that's an interesting note to end on, that
Yeah.
that promoters have a
But
civic responsibility
me
to the new
criticizing
generations.
promoters, yeah.
No, that they have no. If there's any promoters
Yeah.
listening, you have a civic responsibility to the future generations.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And
Um,
you can still put on the bands, the older bands that people want to hear too.
yeah,
No one's
yeah,
saying age people out either.
exactly, exactly. Aaron, can I ask you one or two questions
Go for it,
very
man. Go
quickly?
for it.
I don't know the format of this thing that we've just done. Is this like I've seen your articles and stuff like that? Is it
Yeah,
interview? Is you've recorded this? So is this just for
yeah.
your notes or okay, right.
Well, I sometimes release the audio as a podcast, but if you don't want that,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Well, I'll let you decide if it's worthwhile
Yeah,
to
no, but
do that. But
there's nothing
yeah,
in it that you'd
yeah,
want taken out or anything.
yeah. Not that I can think of. Anyway,
Do you
that
want
should
me to
be all
send
right.
you a link beforehand, and you
Yeah.
could?
It's probably all right.
Okay,
That's great.
great.
I really enjoyed this, Aaron. Thank you very much. Like, yeah, I love. I hadn't heard of your website before Michael told me about it, which I found ridiculous because I'm always looking for people who are taking music
I'm
seriously.
bad at SEO.
Yeah, yeah. But I have to say, like, I really like what you're doing because I think, and I'm not criticizing other people, but it's like I think music journalism is really important, and I think not the mainstream, I hate saying the mainstream media thing, but like
Yeah.
there's a thing of like the top two or three music uh, journalism places that don't give. I think long form is really important, and I
Hmm.
think
I
like
agree.
interviews, I think, and long form reviews and things like that, I think are really important, especially for artists like myself. And it's like I just love when people take it seriously and give the time to it. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate
Well,
that,
this
and I
isn't
hope
you
it's
shit
coming off.
talking.
Yeah.
This is me shit
Yeah.
talking. I'm always very disappointed about how RTE kind of go about their interviews,
Mm,
where they just send everyone the same written questions,
yeah.
and it's always just like the very bare bones basic stuff. I'm always like, hire
Yeah.
me, RTE. I'll do that for free.
I think that's the thing is that like I'm interested enough to dig in and find something, you know,
Yeah.
you know, to find something that's not the same as every, you know, every other
Yeah.
interview. So, you know, I think that's great.
Yeah. That's
Um,
my pitch to RTE. Hire
yeah.
me.
Yeah. So
I'll
are you
leave
who are
this.
listening to this right now?
Yes, which you're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. They're not gonna listen if they're not gonna send out a different questionnaire,
Yeah.
they're not gonna listen to a podcast.
It's just like the easiest thing ever. It's just because I hate doing
Yeah.
written Q&As, but I do them sometimes just because, like, the
Yeah.
artists aren't available for
Yeah.
one of these, and I just kind of like but then it's like it's just the easiest thing in the world, just copy and paste the same thing and then just go, hey, yeah, everyone just fill out these questions, because like it
Yeah.
takes no time to edit, it takes no time to publish. It's like really really lazy, I think. That's my personal
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. But I think there's another thing is like it's having a viewpoint and having an interest in people is very like
Yeah.
regardless of your actual opinion, Aaron, you've made me feel like you were interested in what I had to say,
Oh no,
and
totally,
that's you
totally.
know that's you know there's a skill to that, and I think that's important because other times it's like charity, like, I'm helping you out. So what the fuck are you going to talk about? Like,
Yeah.
and you get that. So I really appreciate it. That's kind of,
Yeah.
it's,
We're just kind of like looking at the watch going, yeah, so what's music?
yeah. So Barry, what's like, oh,
Oh yeah, they get the name wrong. It's really good.
yeah,
Now, to
yeah.
be fair, I've gotten the name of an
Oh,
album
we've
or
all done.
song wrong before, and it's always like really embarrassing. Like they'll correct me, and that's all I'm thinking of for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah, you'll either get it wrong 15 times in a row, or
Yeah.
it'll distract you from the from
I
the
once
rest of the.
interviewed. I was coming home from Liverpool, and I was in the Liverpool airport, and I had to do an interview while I was waiting on my plane. And I was like really tired because I'd been up all day. Because they kick you out of the hotel early. Well, I was in a hostel. They kick you out early, but then the plane wasn't that nice. So I was just like wandering around Liverpool just like for a whole day. I was absolutely exhausted by the time I had to do the interview, and I think I got one of the band members' names wrong, and he was very polite about it. But I caught it, and I went, "Oh, sorry," and then he was very polite about it. But I was just like. Oh, I was just thinking
Yeah, yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
There's a line here, I've fallen below, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, oh man.
I was literally in a
Oh,
cafe in Liverpool, in Liverpool Airport, just trying to find John Lennon Liverpool Airport, just trying to find like, some place that was open at like 9 o'clock at night that I could just was quiet enough. And then some guy
yeah,
sat beside me, just started blaring music on his phone without an earphone. Like, God's sake! It's like, yeah, as you were saying, just
yeah,
being
yeah.
passive aggressive about it. So that's the
Ah,
fun of journalism.
yeah. Well, look, thank you very, very much. I really
Thanks,
appreciate it. So,
thanks, Billy. Thanks very
you know,
much.
yeah, it's good to see you. And if you are, I may send you a link if I'm going to be playing a gig in the middle of July. It'd be great to have you along.
Perfect, man.
But
Yeah, my contact
yeah,
details
yeah,
on the site. So if
yeah,
you just go to that form, I'll get your email that way.
yeah. I'll send it along, and if you're free or whatever like that, I'll put you on the list. Anyway.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you very much. It was great to meet you.
Take care of
Okay.
yourself.
Yeah. Thanks. See you. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to that episode of Post-Burnout.com interviews. We're an independent venture run by yours truly, and as I said at the beginning, liking, rating, subscribing, and sharing really helps us out a lot. If you're feeling extra generous, we do have a PayPal donation link in the episode description, but don't feel obligated, of course. We've also begun releasing occasional exclusive episodes on Spotify, so subscribe there if you'd be interested in hearing those. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.